I got this today. We'll see how that works. I got it today for my birthday. It is my belly button birthday today. Most importantly, it's my mom's first Mother's Day celebration. Um, so let's see. So yesterday I left off where Bill was saying um, he swore not to drink, and this time he meant business. Shortly after, I came home drunk. There had been no fight. Where had been my resolve? I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way and I had taken it. Was I crazy? So that's what Bill starting to wonder. Am I crazy? Um, I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. So he calls it an appalling lack of perspective into himself. To him, of himself, of his life. Renewing my resolve, I tried again. So again, this is what the doctor's talking about when he's describing the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over unless a person can experience an entire psychic change. So here's Bill, drunk again. Where had my fight? I had no fight. Someone passed me a drink and I took a drink. Renewing my resolve, I tried again. Some time passed and confidence began to be replaced by cocksureness. That would be arrogance. I could laugh at the gin mills, the bars, the places where people are drinking. Now I had what it takes. One day I walked into a cafe to telephone. Okay, so he's saying, one day I walked into a cafe to telephone. So at the time he's writing this, telephone is a verb. Kind of shows you it's vintage, this text here. But one day I walked into a cafe to telephone, to call somebody, to use the phone. In no time, I was beating on the bar, asking myself how it happened. As the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I would manage better next time. But I might as well get good and drunk then. And I did. The remorse. So there he is. He goes in to use the telephone. Before he knows it, he's banging his head on the bar, thinking like, how the fuck did this happen again? As the whiskey rose to my head, so as I got drunk, I told myself I would manage better next time. But since I'm already drinking, so he's a few drinks in, and instead of going like, what the hell is going on here? I got to get out of here before this gets out of hand. He's like, well, I've already had a drink, so we might as well. The remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. So that's probably an anxiety attack. He's probably like having a panic attack. A terrible sense of impending calamity. I hardly dared cross the street lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it was scarcely daylight. So the remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. I hardly dared cross the street lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it was scarcely daylight. An all-night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My writhing nerves were stilled at last. A morning paper told me the market had gone to hell again. Well, so had I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. That was a hard thought. Should I kill myself? No, not now. Then a mental fog settled down. Gin would fix that. So, 2 bottles and oblivion. So it seems to me like Bill went into a bar or a cafe to telephone a friend. Hello, everybody. And started drinking, and then now it's the next morning. He hasn't even been home yet. And then he drank a couple bottles of beer, 2 bottles of gin, and now he's just blacked out again off in the wild. Okay. The mind and body are marvelous mechanisms, for mine endured the agony 2 more years. So he's saying, Bill Wilson is what we're reading about in the Alcoholics Anonymous text. The mind and body are marvelous mechanisms, for mine endured this agony for 2 more years. Sometimes I stole from my wife's slender purse when the morning terror and madness were on me. Again, I swayed dizzily before an open window or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for a weakling. There were flights from city to country and back as my wife and I sought escape. Then came the night when my physical and mental torture was so hellish, I feared I would burst through my window, sash and all. Somehow I managed to drag my mattress to the lower floor, lest I suddenly leap. So he's really fallen apart now at this point, right? I'm sorry to hear that. Ricoca, my friend Mark Swan, well, just passed away from alcohol poisoning. It's very sad. It's terrible. That's kind of why I'm reading this, because this book has helped me. And, you know, if it can help anybody, one person, that'd be awesome too. I read this anyway, to myself, by myself, and I figured, what the hell, click on this newfangled technology and read the book and see what happens, So that's what we're doing. Shaman Murad. So what this guy is explaining is his dark journey into the grips of alcoholism, and then eventually, as we go through this, how he got out of it and became one of the founding members of AA. So 2 more years. So he's describing basically like this blackout all-night bender, and then he's saying this went on for 2 more years. He was taking money from his wife when the morning terror and madness was upon me. And if anyone's ever been addicted to anything, we probably know what that's like, taking some money from our parents or friends or whatever to just get what we need for that moment to feel better. Again, I swayed dizzily before an open window or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing himself a weakling. Back and forth from the country as my wife and I sought escape. Then came the night when the physical and mental torture was so hellish I feared I would burst through my window, sash and all. So I think just like curtains, window, he's just going to burst through the window. And he literally managed to drag his mattress to the first floor so he couldn't just like jump out of the window. So he felt like he was so unpredictable himself that he didn't know what he was going to do. A doctor came with heavy sedative. The next day, he found me drinking both gin and the sedative, and the sedative was probably some kind of morphine or something like that. This combination, so now he's mixing, prescription drugs basically and alcohol. This combination soon landed me on the rocks. People feared for my sanity, and so did I. I could eat little or nothing when drinking, and I was 40 pounds underweight. My brother-in-law is a physician. And through his kindness and that of my mother, I was placed in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. So as we talked about, let's see, in the forewords, this is Towns Hospital in New York. Under the so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. Now we could look up what belladonna treatment is. Belladonna, I believe, is a flower, like literally a flower. Hydrotherapy and mild exercise helped much. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, I had been seriously ill bodily and mentally. So that's Dr. Silkworth. So he's saying, best of all, I met a kind doctor, and that's Dr. William D. Silkworth, who explained to him the nature of alcoholism as the doctor seemed to believe it was. And thank you, brother, Shaman Murad. So the doctor explained to him the nature of alcoholism. I believed where the doctor said, I think you're both mentally and you have a physical condition as well. It's not all just mental. It's not all just moral. It's not that you're a bad person. It's that you're a sick person, okay? Something in the system is not in alignment, which is basically what a disease is. If we say a disease, it's when there's something, a system isn't functioning the way it should, okay? So cancer, any other kind of thing. It's when there's something that's disrupting the system and it's not working properly, okay? That's all disease has to mean for this, for the purpose of what we're talking about here. So the case, he is saying, I'm ill, I'm seriously ill, bodily and mentally. It relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. My incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. Understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. For 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high, which I think is just an old, I mean, it's like an old school term for like times were good. I felt good. The goose hung high. I went to town regularly and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. Self-knowledge is what he's saying. So this doctor explained it to me. Now I know what's wrong with me, and now I'll be fine. Okay. But self-knowledge, right? But it was not. For the frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. After a time, I returned to the hospital. This was the finish, the curtain, it seemed for me. My weary and despairing wife was informed that it would, a second here. My weary and despairing wife was informed that it would all end with heart failure during delirium tremens, which is alcohol withdrawal, or I would develop a wet brain. And a wet brain is when alcohol literally for lack of a better term, like dissolves the membrane that protects your brain, and causes basically permanent brain damage due to alcohol. So she would soon have to give me over to the undertaker or the asylum. So this is a guy who just years prior was a multi-million, like for our purposes today, a multi-millionaire, successful stockbroker, investment guy, traveled the country with his wife, went to war, World War II, came back, was praised by people as a good leader, a brilliant, smart young man with a promising future. And here he is saying, by 1935-ish time, like it's insane asylum or dead is basically what his options are, because he cannot control the urge to drink. They did not need to tell me. I knew. And I almost welcomed the idea. I wonder if anyone here has ever been in that position. Where like the idea, if we're in the grips of addiction of any kind, right? There comes a time when you're almost like, maybe it'd be better if I just, which is never true, ever. People that think maybe it'll be better if I'm gone, it's never true. ever true. It's never true. I'd be better off if I was dead. No, not true ever. No matter how bad it gets, that's never true, you know? The time to pass on from this world comes when it comes. And it should not be I don't believe it should be by our own hand, okay? Time takes its toll on every human, you know, and then the time comes, whenever that is, you know, or something happens and maybe we go sooner than we thought we would because something happened, but that happened. It should never come by us doing it. There's always a second chance. Even if you've had 79,000 chances, there's always a second chance, okay, to get things straightened out in life. So this is what Bill's saying. It's like it's either the Undertaker or the Asylum. They didn't need to tell me that I was going to die. I knew it. I could feel it. And I almost welcomed the idea. So here's a man who's like, well, fuck it, you know. Time to die, I guess. It was a devastating blow to my pride. Yeah, right? Like I just said, this dude that we're reading about right now, just a few years prior, was a very successful, kind of rich, well-to-do dude. And now he's in a hospital on the brink of death because he cannot stop drinking, which is, it is what it is, man. That's what happens to alcoholics. I, who had thought so well of myself and my abilities, of my capacity to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last. Now I was to plunge into the dark, joining that endless procession of sots who had gone on before. The endless procession of sots. So like a sot, it's like poor guy, you know, like fools. Poor guy, you know, like just damn. So what a sot, you know, like a fool kind of. So now I was to plunge into the dark, joining that endless procession of sots who had gone on before. I thought of my poor wife. There had been much happiness after all. What would I not give to make amends? But that was over now. So this is Bill Wilson explaining. He's at a point where he's thinking now, he's in the hospital. He's thinking, I'm going to die, right? He's thinking about his wife and he's thinking, damn, we did have good times though. You know, we were happy. We were in love, but that's over now. You know, and what I would give, what I would not give to make amends. But that was over now. No, now, spoiler alert, it's not over, okay? There's a freaking happy ending, but we got to keep going. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. So morass is like a pit, I guess, maybe like a muddy pit. In that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. So he's admitting it. Okay, so this is Bill. If you ever look at the 12 steps, the first step is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. So Bill is there, okay? He's at step 1. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital a broken man. Fear sobered me for a bit. Then came the insidious insanity of that first drink. And on Armistice Day, 1934, I was off again. So this is 1934. I was off again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere or would stumble along into a miserable end. Okay. So he got out of that hospital where he's like, I'm definitely going to die. He sobered up in the hospital. He got out of the hospital and drank again. Insanity. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I'd have to be shut up somewhere or I would stumble along to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. In reality, that was the beginning of my last debauch. So my last relapse, my last run, my last spree. I was soon to be catapulted into what I would like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that it is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. So the story is Bill's story from the text Alcoholics Anonymous. All right. So we're talking about AA as it's commonly referred to, but this is the book that people read and that people have been reading since 1939 as it relates to alcoholism and the recovery from alcoholism. So that's what we're reading. And this is Bill's story. Bill was one of the founders of AA. Okay. So I'm gonna die. He gets out of the hospital. He drinks again. He's sure this is the end. But he's saying, right, how dark it is before the dawn. So it's about to get happy from here on out. Okay. Bill has hit his bottom, as we call it, right? Near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen. With a certain satisfaction, I reflected, there was enough gin concealed about my house to carry me through that night and the next day. My wife was at work, so he was home alone, getting drunk, not working, obviously. I wondered whether I dare hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. I would need it before daylight. My musing was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice. So he's sitting at his kitchen table by himself, drinking, drunk. His wife is at work, making little money to try to pay their bills, okay? And he's just sitting there like, drunk again, satisfied that he's got enough booze stashed around the house to get him through that day. And then he's thinking, I wonder if I could hide a full bottle of gin by the head of our bed so he could like grab it when he before he wakes up and, so he could drink throughout the night, basically, while his wife is sleeping right next to him. Okay. That's what he's doing. Completely useless thinking, just sitting at the table wondering how he could keep drinking until tomorrow. So he's saying, my musing, my daydreaming about drinking for the rest of the night and day, was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old friend, an old school friend, asked if he might come over. So, buddy calls, hey, yeah, come on over. He was sober. And that's italicized. It was years since I could remember his coming to New York in that condition, meaning sober. I was amazed. Rumor had it that he had been committed for alcoholic insanity. So this is like your buddy that you used to run with in high school or college or, whenever, who you haven't seen in years, but like, yo, this guy's a dog. He drinks like me. He calls you. He's like, hey, you want to hang out for a little bit? I'm sober. And you're like, what? I wondered how he had escaped the insanity of alcohol. Of course he would have dinner and then I could drink openly with him. Unmindful of his welfare, I thought only of recapturing the spirit of other days. There was that time we had chartered an airplane to complete a JAG, and I don't know what that means. Okay, but they chartered an airplane, right? So he and his buddy basically got a private plane in today's world. His coming was an oasis in this dreary desert of futility. The very thing, an oasis. Drinkers are like that. Okay. The door opened. So his friend comes to see him. His friend is sober. The door opened and he stood there, fresh, skinned, and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had got into the fellow. He wasn't himself. Come on, what's all this about? I queried. I asked. He looked straight at me, simply but smiling. He said, I've got religion. Okay, so that's the quote. This friend in the book, in this story, is Ebby Thatcher. Okay. I've got religion. So this is Ebby Thatcher. I was aghast. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspected a little cracked about religion. So Bill's like being prejudiced against the fact that he said, I've got religion. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspected a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire all right. But bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. So Bill's thinking like, whatever, go ahead, tell me about how you're sober. You know, I get to drink, you get to talk a bunch of nonsense, that's fine. But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how two men had appeared in court persuading the judge to suspend his commitment to the insane asylum. They had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. 2 months. He had come to pass his experience along to me if I cared to have it. I was shocked, but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sundays, way over there on the hillside. There was that proffered temperance pledge I never signed. So he's talking about a temperance pledge, like a pledge in church not to drink. My grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doing, his insistence that the spheres really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen. His fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. Okay, so Bill, while his friend is talking about religious things, he's having like memories of church as a kid, them, people trying to say like sign this pledge or like pledge to not drink, and to and then he's thinking about his grandfather, how his grandfather kind of had some prejudice against religious people, how he said like, yeah, they've got great music, but I'm not down for a preacher telling me what to think and how to believe and how to live and all that. Like that's what his grandfather was saying. And he was thinking about his grandfather's fearlessness as he spoke of these things right up until the moment that he died, So some people are like atheists their whole life until they're about to die. And then all of a sudden they believe, because out of fear, I think. And that's what Bill is admiring in a way about his grandfather. It's like he held, he stayed with his position, like, screw all this religious shit, all the way up until he died. So Bill's kind of like remembering these things, okay? These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. That wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. So remember, the story starts at Winchester Cathedral, Bill's story, where we read that doggerel, right, on the tombstone. Here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier is ne'er forgot whether he dieth by musket or by pot. Pot being booze, alcohol, right? So that's a tombstone he saw of a soldier who died from drinking, not from war. Okay, and like that's ironic or whatever, right? Whatever that is. So that wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. Okay. So here's Bill. Okay, this is Bill's story saying his buddy's talking to him about all this religious shit, hasn't had a drink in 2 months. I had always believed in a power greater than myself. Wow. This is Bill. I had always believed in a power greater than myself. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are. For that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. Okay, so that's a good point that Bill's making. He's saying, despite all this craziness, like in the back of his mind, I've always believed in something, right? God, like I'm whatever it's called is basically what he's saying. God, a power greater than myself. I was not an atheist. It's popular to say you're an atheist. Maybe. I mean, in certain circles, maybe. Or it's like cool or whatever, right? But he's saying like nobody really is, because it's like you have to believe in the strange proposition that the universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. Like there's no point to anything. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggested vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay it all. How could there be so much of precise and immutable law and no intelligence? I simply had to believe in a spirit of the universe who knew neither time nor limitation. But that was as far as I had gone. Okay, so Bill in the hospital admits he's powerless over alcohol and that his life had become unmanageable because he says alcohol was my master. He was like resigned to die. Okay. And here he's doing a step two, kind of came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. Right. So let's see where we are here now. Because this next part is good. All right. So, but that was as far as I had gone. With ministers and the world's religion, I parted right there. So he's saying, I believe in a power greater than myself. I believe in something, but when it comes to religion and religious leaders, with ministers and the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me who was love, superhuman strength, and direction, I became irritated and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. So he's saying, I believe in a power, I believe in something, but to say it loves me and knows me personally, fuck off. Like that's what he's saying. To Christ, he's referring to Jesus Christ. To Christ, I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. Damn. His moral teaching, most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. So they're saying to Jesus, yes, he was a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. So he's taking a little jab like at Christians collectively there. Saying the people that claim Jesus don't really act like it, right? They act differently. They say one thing with their mouth, they do another thing with their actions, which we could find that in the world if we want to find that. We could see that. His moral teaching, Jesus, most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. As far as Jesus's teachings are concerned, he said, I, adopted the parts that were convenient and the other ones, disregarded. The wars which had been fought, the burnings and chicanery, I actually got to look up that word, right? That religious dispute had facilitated made me sick. So he's saying the wars which had been fought, the burnings, the chaos that religious dispute had facilitated made me sick. I honestly doubted whether, on balance, the religions of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I had seen in Europe and since, the power of God in human affairs was negligible. The brotherhood of man, a grim jest. If there was a devil, he seemed the boss universal, and he certainly had me. So, Bill's saying, for all the wars and all the chaos that religion has caused in this perspective from where he is right now at this point, he's saying, I don't know if religion's actually done any good in the world. Okay. And if there's a devil, damn, he's certainly winning that war. That's what he's saying. But my friend, this is Ebby Thatcher, his friend, who's bringing him the message. But my friend sat before me, and he made the point blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he he had admitted complete defeat. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. Had this power originated in him? Obviously, it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that minute. And this was none at all. So Bill's saying, so Ebby is telling him, basically step one, step two. Admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Two, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So that's what he's saying. But my friend sat across me and made the point blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself, step two. His human will had failed, step one. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat, step one. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. Had this power originated in him? Obviously, it had not. He's saying there had been no more power in him at the time than there was in me at that minute. None at all. So this is Bill and Ebby sitting at the table talking about basically step one, step two. All right. So I'm going to pause it there, and we will continue this tomorrow. All right.